Liz. Hi,
How are
nice to
you
see you
doing?
again.
This is Zach's computer.
Susan, sit down and tell us what you've been up to since we last saw you.
No, that's what my boys do.
2 months. I still work as a full-time mediator for the 7th Judicial Circuit. I think, I'm trying to think of what's changed. This is work-related. I last week went up to the Tallahassee with Catholic Days of the Capitol, which I've done a couple times with my church group. And it's nice to see the other end of the process, but it does definitely make me appreciate the judicial branch. I'm still involved in, advancing my mediation skills. I still participate in teen court when asked. I try to assist out where I can, but mainly this is full-time mediation every day, all day, which I enjoy immensely. And I realize that when you're appointed, there's never a guarantee of which slot you're going to fill. The judges, chief judge should always rotate, but if it was this family bench here in Flagler, I've been coming up doing mediations in Flagler for about 6 months now. The mediators for the court program, all three of us rotate up through Flagler, so it's become more familiar with the system up here, and it would be, an easy spot to kind of step in with my background as well.
Susan, what sets you apart from the other candidates? You've seen the list. Tell me what sets you apart from them.
A lot of them have applied a lot more than me, but I know, and this is true of many of the candidates, but not all of them. I do have a very diverse practice background with my 4 years as a public defender, getting criminal trial experience, felony jury trial, misdemeanor, juvenile, 8 years in private practice, not only, helping to run a small office, but then having the diverse caseload that you do in private practice, whether it's probate, whether it's a criminal case, a family case, real estate transaction, and being able to help the whole client. I appreciate it in private practice for certain. And then the role that I have now as a mediator places me in the role of a neutral person, where you're not advocating for an individual, but trying to help two different parties come up to a resolution. And I think the skills I've developed as a mediator in issue recognition and timeliness on trying to keep the process moving along would translate well to the bench.
Did you submit a writing sample?
Yes, I had attached, I would say, part of an appellate brief.
Oh, as an exhibit?
Yes, as an exhibit, yes. And I'd also, I think, attach maybe a motion as well. So, yes.
Tell me about the time pressures on your job, and we talked a little bit about this last time, but I just find this so fascinating because I've inherited some of Liz Blackburn's cases. She became a judge, and I can't get things to settle in a whole day long mediation or a half day. What are the times that you do your mediation? How often do you resolve the full case or major issues in the case?
In Volusia County, I have them set at 2 hours. In Flagler County, we have them like at 3 hours. We do 2 a day in Flagler County, and I think part of that, I didn't set up that calendar, but I think that's more because we have so much travel to get up to Flagler County. But in Volusia, they're set, at 8:30, 10:45, and 2, and so in theory, it's going to leave me 2 hours and sometimes a few minutes between them. And some we can get, done kind of like on the money, exactly 2 hours. Some it's running a little bit longer, but you're really close, and you may run a little bit over. And sometimes the issues, either there's a lot of issues, or it takes the parties a bit of time before they can start to make some progress, and you may need to do a part 2. And sometimes that's just what the parties need, that they're not necessarily emotionally ready the first day they come in, even though they know they're there for mediation, to take all the steps they need to take. And so sometimes having baby steps helps them, and ultimately if you get a settlement that works for them, that's better, because hopefully people settle and they won't have to come back. And I mean come back and like relitigate for the rest of their children's lives or anything. So it just depends on the case. Some of them will get done right in 2 hours. Sometimes I'll have a cancellation and we'll take advantage of that extra time, and we'll go 3 or 4 hours. And other ones, like I said, maybe we'll get a temporary agreement in and see how that goes, and maybe they'll come back and finish up, or maybe they won't need to come back because they've made enough progress that with the assistance of their attorneys, if they have them, can go ahead and get to that next step on their own.
Excuse my ignorance, but I don't do family law, so I'm curious as to who comes to you as a family court mediator versus who does private family court mediation?
This is by state statute, the circuit's mediation program is an income limited program. So to qualify, the parties, both parents combined income, if they're, or husband or wife, their combined income needs to be below 100,000. So frankly, that's a lot of people that qualify in our circuit. That doesn't mean you have to be referred to our program. When I was in private practice, I may have had clients that would qualify for the program, but they could come up with some funds and we would use a private mediator just because there's a little more flexibility there, and that you could say, let's set a mediation Thursday at 3:30 or, Tuesday at 1, versus with the courts program, it's kind of, these are the times you have available. So it's an income-based program, and then the judge has to find that the parties are qualified, sign an order of referral, and then they get, set, whether it's a divorce with or without kids, paternity action, temporary custody by extended family, modifications, contempts, all variety of actions.
What do you do, I know you have these 2-hour blocks for mediations. What do you do when you have a mediation, it's not quite finished, 2 hours have gone by, there's people waiting out in the hallway for the next one? What do you do then?
Well, sometimes Mr. Clemens, he's been in my office a few times. Ideally, it would be great to say, get the first people out and start the next one right away. But the first people who are in there, even though I start pointing out the clock and say, look, we need to, you're so close. And so some cases we can, wind down, and it still probably takes, 10 or 15 minutes to wind down to decide, are we going to set another day? Do you want to, leave it as, not that we use this term, but I'll say an impasse and, continue to negotiate it on your own? And other ones, they have come in with such tension and they have made such progress that you kind of lose that momentum. And so as much as I hate to not start the other parties on time, from experience, that momentum will be lost. Like, they're not going to go out and just work it out themselves, that they don't have the temperament to do it at that time. And so sometimes I will push through, and I hate to make other people wait, but it's trying to find that balance of, do I want something that we've already now invested 2 hours in to fall apart, and those parties who don't understand, in particular if they don't have attorneys, they don't understand the court system and why it's taking so long, and because there's, they feel that there's no one there to help them, and to say, well, now you have to come back, and, or not that they have to come back, but give them the opportunity to come back in 6 weeks, and that's kind of heartbreaking to them, like, why is it 6 weeks? It's just because it's a very busy program. We don't have the ability to say, hey, we're running late, how about come back tomorrow? Like, that would be marvelous, but you would, need to hire way more mediators, and I don't think that there's probably the budget for that. So, unfortunately, it is that people wait, and I apologize if I made you wait, but when you're the person in my office and trying to get that settlement and done, and I look at it that if you get that case resolved, and that's one case that is not on the judge's calendar, so now the judge has a little more free time on their calendar to have a hearing or a trial or a temporary relief matter, the more cases we can get resolved.
And then what's your role after mediation? Do you give a mediator's report to the judge?
Yes, so regardless of the outcome, there's just a one-page report that says, either we settled or didn't settle. And so if we didn't settle, then that's all they see. If we did settle, then we're, drafting a settlement agreement, and I'll do a proposed final judgment, and, the copies, the envelopes. And some of this is more of a court admin role versus a mediator role. In particular with pro se parties, if it's a divorce and they don't have, a driver's license or affidavit of cooperating witness in the file, I'll try to remind them of that right then. And if I can get a copy of their driver's license to establish the residency so the judge can sign off on the final judgment. Or if they don't have their parent education family stabilization course done, I'll remind them of that. And again, part of that's more court administration, because if those little I's aren't dotted and T's aren't crossed when it goes up to the judge, they may not be able to close out the case. And so it's then setting it for another hearing just to ask these parties to say, hey, prove your residency so we can, verify we have jurisdiction. So it includes some of those aspects.
What else?
carrying over what I asked you to the bench, attorneys, they schedule a 1-hour hearing. The hour comes around, you're not finished, there's people in the hallway. How do you handle that situation?
From my experience, in a trial or in a hearing, whether it's before a judge or a GM, they tend to cut you off, and I understand that, because you have other cases that are waiting. If you do. Now, I get that there's also, judges need office time to make all the rulings for all the cases that they've been hearing, and I know sometimes judges will run it a little bit longer, but even if it's the last case of the day, I've seen them be very considerate of, hey, we've got clerks here who need to leave, we have sheriff's deputies that, we don't need to have, working overtime, and, you either say, look, can you wrap it up in the 10 minutes we have left, or do you want to reschedule? And then, the attorneys kind of have to decide, can we get this wrapped up in the 10 minutes we have left, or are we going to come back? And I know as a mediator, when I've seen some cases don't get resolved, and I, just follow up just to see, did they end up settling, or did they end up going to trial? And it does pain me at times when I see parties, they don't get settlement mediation because it's just very contentious, and they have a hearing and they run out of time, and it's continued for a month, and they have a hearing again and they run out of time. And I just know in the case that someone's not getting time sharing, or someone's not getting child support, and that leads to some of the frustration of the litigants not understanding why they're not being heard. Now, some of that maybe is the attorneys need to schedule more time, and the judges need to have the time available, and in a perfect world they would, but you don't always have that perfect world. They have a lot of obligations, and to trying to find that balance. But in a trial, you've got to, or a hearing, you really have to have that time allotted, and especially with attorneys, you expect them to know how much they would need. Pro se litigants, I think, I don't tend to see judges allot as much time, because I don't think they tend to take as much time in presenting their issues. But you've got to keep that moving along, because the next case is just as important. But I do feel bad for those ones that I see have like a 2-part or 3-part or 4-part hearing over many months, and time sharing's not taking place.
All right, Susan, thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
You know our process. We'll be reaching out to you later today.
All right, thank you. All have a wonderful day. Nice seeing you again. Nice seeing everyone else. I hope you enjoy family ball.